Good afternoon. My name is Brian Leib. I'm the Executive Director of the Iranian Americans for Liberty, and I'm currently sitting in IAL studios right here in Washington, D.C. On behalf of our Board of Directors, Board of Advisors, and supporters all around the nation, please allow me to welcome all of you to this afternoon's 4th Congressional Meet and Greet of 2022. In 2021, we proudly hosted 16 members of Congress with members such as Congresswoman Young Kim, Congressman Byron Donalds, Congressman Chip Roy, Congresswoman Yvette Harrell, and also Claudia Tenney, and many more. In 2022, we've hosted events with Congressman Pat Fallon, former Acting Director of National Intelligence Rick Grinnell, Congresswoman Mary Miller, and just last night with Senator Ron Johnson. This afternoon, we are truly honored to host Congresswoman Claudia Tenney from the Empire State of New York. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our organization, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. The Iranian Americans for Liberty are a bipartisan group of Iranian Americans from all around the nation that are working together to support and strengthen U.S. foreign policy and national security solutions that bring democracy, human rights accountability, and freedom of speech to the Iranians living under the oppressive Islamic Republic of Iran. So that's a little bit more about our organization. Now let me tell you a little bit more about our esteemed guests sitting across the table from me. Claudia Tenney was first elected to serve as a member of the United States House of Representatives on November 8th of 2016 after winning one of the most expensive races in the nation. As a freshman member of the 115th Congress, she served on the House Financial Services Committee, and Claudia was elected to the House of Representatives for a second time in November of 2020 in what has yet again been one of the most expensive and competitive congressional races in the country. Prior to Claudia's election in November 2016, she also served as a member of the New York State Assembly, and she was first elected to that body in November of 2010. Now in Congress, Claudia serves on the House Small Business Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And in addition, she is the founder and co-chair of the House Election Integrity Caucus, which I think has around 50 members. And finally, something that I know Claudia is very proud of, her son is a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, and he currently serves as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps. So at this time, it's my pleasure to kick the program off by introducing our very special guest. Congresswoman, thank you very much for being back with us, and I'd like to turn it over to you for some opening remarks.
Thank you. I really appreciate what you do. Iranians for Democracy is a critically important organization. I just want to correct you on a couple of things. My son is now a captain in the Marine Corps.
Amazing.
So that's an older bio. I thought you were going to say my biggest accomplishment was being the 1975 teenage curling champion.
Didn't know that.
It's just a fun thing.
Okay.
But anyway, this is really important work that you're doing, and you keep in touch, and we're, obviously Twitter friends and in the social media realm as well. But having important voices on what we're dealing with in this country and in the world, we're at a crossroads. It's a critical time, and every day becomes more dire, especially when we deal with your important issue and how much the Iranian influence, particularly what's happening in the Middle East right now, in that very sort of dangerous part of the world where we were seeing this great progress toward peace, and now that's been eroded by a weak administration and an administration that seems to want to just become beholden to these terrorist organizations like the Hezbollah and Hamas, and then the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and then the mullahs who run Iran, and really deny the opportunity for their own citizens to have a chance at democracy, which is what's so important about what your organization does. And I know so many people around the world are so grateful for what you do, because these people don't have a voice. And of all the things that we should be doing as the United States is empowering and giving a voice, particularly First Amendment rights, to people like the Iranians who are desperate to have a country back that is democratic, that is fair, that is not engaged in terrorism, even against its own people. So I'm just delighted to be here with you. I know we've had a few forums, and it's fun to talk about this issue, but a lot of people forget about it, how important it is. And so I'm glad you're bringing it to the forefront again, as you always do, because we are in a critical time now with this administration and their attempts to try to actually resurrect the JCPOA or the Iran nuclear deal. With what I think is less than good negotiating skills. Let's put it that way.
Sure. We can maybe say negotiations, it kind of seems very one-sided.
Yeah.
and we'll talk about that a little bit later today. But thank you for those words, and let's jump right in, right, to some questions here. I talked a little bit about your committee assignments when we first kicked off here, but tell our audience a little bit more about these assignments and maybe particularly about the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Yeah, obviously when I first got elected, as the bio indicated, and I was on the Financial Services Committee. I have a background as a bank attorney. I did some tax and business and corporate work, along with, a wide variety of a general practice, and then, which is why I ended up on financial services. Really an honor to serve there. But then when you say that I had the most expensive elections, I've heard from various people that my two races in 18 and 20. 18 I didn't win, and 20 I won by a very small margin. The Democrats spent more on my race in terms of saturation of ad buy, because our district's not that expensive. So for some reason they really don't want me in office, and they really want to put a lot of money into a central New York area. I don't know why, but I think it's because I try to tell the truth whenever I can. I'm very transparent about everything. We explain every vote in the House of Representatives. I don't know if there's too many members might say how they voted, but we put a long explanation out and explain why we voted a certain way, so no one is confused about. Sometimes they see bills that look great and we take them apart and explain that. And that's why I want this process that we're dealing with in the Middle East to be so transparent, especially dealing with the Iranians. And so it was a real opportunity for me with my past to get on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I've always wanted to be on the committee. I had an opportunity to get on the committee. Small business I got on. Because I didn't get sworn in until late, I couldn't get on either the Appropriations Committee or back on Financial Services. I'm actually looking to hopefully get on the Ways and Means Committee, which I think will be exciting for me with my background as well. But the issue in terms of why the Foreign Affairs Committee is so appealing to me is I actually, believe it or not, spent a lot of time in the former Yugoslavia. I went there as a student and ended up, and that was in 1981, and ended up going back, studying Serbo-Croatian, Croatian particularly, and then I worked for the Yugoslav consulate, and I worked on the Olympics in Sarajevo. So it was really exciting for me, and I've just kept, a love and a great interest in this part of the world for many years. The Balkans are so critically important. They're the gateway between East and West. They've been conquered and involved in just about every major human war throughout the many years in modern existence. So they've been involved in one way or another. Tragedy has besieged them many times. Sure. So they're just in an interesting mix. They reminded me a lot of the United States. All these mixed cultures, mixed group of people, and they're so close, to the Middle East. You can't really get there without going through the Balkans. And so I've kept my interest in that region of the world, and that's why I wanted to bring that to Foreign Affairs. And then, obviously I've gotten a tremendous interest in the Middle East, being able to serve in that committee and just being introduced to so many different issues there. My son was actually deployed in the Middle East. He was in Kuwait and also did some work in Erbil. So he's had some experience over there, and it was really interesting for him as a Marine officer. And then, he's now a reservist, but he's still actively involved in a reserve unit. So Foreign Affairs is really one of those committees where, people say we don't get a lot done or we're bipartisan, but it's very symbolic. And I think we are very effective in many ways because we raise the issues and do the work that a lot don't see, that you wouldn't otherwise hear about. Our explanations, especially on how we're voting and why we're voting on certain things. I know there was a kind of a controversial vote last night on Ukraine and the issue that brings, but that impacts the entire world, not just the United States, not just Ukraine. And also, if you look at Ukraine as the breadbasket to the world, we're seeing food security issues that are starting to arise as we're not getting the harvests out of Ukraine because of Putin's war and unprovoked invasion, which means that it's not getting to Turkey and the Middle East and a lot of these countries that rely on the harvest from Ukraine. So all this thing is all bubbling up again, not to mention the tragedy that's happening there as well. But eventually we're all going to be impacted by this.
So it sounds like Foreign Affairs is never a dull moment.
No.
And you have, I know, a lot of great colleagues that you serve on there with and a lot of mutual friends. But honestly, I mean, from the outside looking in, as I look at it, I mean, I think, Claudia, I think you're probably the most effective. I mean, you're consistent, your voice is consistent, and it's amazing to see. So
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I want to bring us to a level where we are operating a government that is accountable to the people, accountable to our Constitution, and making sure that we're keeping peace around the world. That's not an easy thing to do. And I think a lot of common sense has kind of been moved away from our what's happening in our federal government. We often have gotten too large to the point where our bureaucracy is suffocating the ability of the people to really have a voice. And we're slinking ourselves into some type of authoritarianism. And I think we have so many models of the world, around the world, we don't want to emulate, certainly, that have collapsed different types of those models. I lived in Yugoslavia when it was a communist country. You see the type of authoritarianism you're seeing in the Middle East, particularly Iran, and the devastating and negative impacts it has on not just their own country, but the regions that where they reside, and obviously Iran's aggressive use of their own people's money and treasure to help Hezbollah and different terrorist organizations around the region, and really just wreak havoc in the neighborhood and against their neighbors.
Well, you just made a point, and that's a good segue into the next question here. On May 4th, you announced your support for measures to defund President Joe Biden's unconstitutional, quote, Ministry of Truth, also known as the so-called Disinformation Governance Board. First of all, this sounds like something that, to your point, would happen in Tehran or Beijing, not here in America. But tell us more. Why are you opposing this?
Yeah, I mean, I read all those novels when I was young. I never thought it was dystopian. Oh God, we're never going to be there. But here we are. It's 1984 in the United States, where we're seeing the government quelling criticism by creating an arm of using our taxpayer dollars, an arm of our Homeland Security Department, of all things, to silence the views of people who speak out in what they define as what is true. And it is absolutely incredible that this is happening in the United States. We've seen this happen on Twitter, on social media, with big tech. We've seen what happened in the 2020 election. But to see our government actually invest in a so-called, information or disinformation ministry, is really what they are. That's just incredible for a country that's founded on free speech, the First Amendment. I mean, that's our most important right that we have as American citizens. And founded on the concept of individual rights and freedom. And all of a sudden now we don't have a marketplace of ideas. We can't say what we want to say in the public square. And a lot of people don't understand the First Amendment. Sometimes the worst kind of speech is the most protected. That's why we have a country like we have. And I think as Americans, this woke culture and this hypersensitivity, people can't, when we were young, I mean, I'm saying me, you're a lot younger than I am. The old,
just a couple days.
The old sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. I mean, the First Amendment has restrictions, but they're very, very broad. I mean, you really have to be yelling fire in a crowded movie house, which is the old Supreme Court standard. You really have to be in a situation where you are, threatening imminent harm to someone. And we're getting offended by somebody not getting our pronouns right, and then that type of stuff, which worries me, that where we are as a country, because we need to, look, I'm a mother of a Marine, and I care very deeply about our people who serve in the military and what they do and the sacrifice, to answer the call to service, whether you're a fireman, a police officer on the beat, or anyone who does that, and particularly the military. To see what some group, say the Westboro Baptist Church, goes to, the funerals of servicemen and women who've been killed in action and celebrate them. That's a horrible form of speech, but it's also protected speech. And we as a country need to be able to tolerate that speech so that we can assess it, decide that that's something we don't accept, or that view is not, and if we're not having that open debate, you're not going to see us get to good conclusions. So when the government is closing us down in our ability to debate and to really find the truth or explore the truth, half the process of getting to the truth is exploring it. That is a grave concern to me. And I've supported 2 bills to try to defund that, and we're hoping the Democrats follow follow along with us, and we just hope the Biden administration doesn't follow through with this.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
It's just, it's really incredible that we're at this place.
Well, it started, I think, last summer, when you saw the DOJ memo about, parents and moms or domestic terrorists, and it's a slippery slope that we've been on for a while now. So
yeah, Merrick Garland, very disappointed with his role as Attorney General, and particularly grateful that he did not become a Supreme Court justice. Let me say that I just never realized the depths of his partisanship and his unwillingness to really uphold his oath of office. And it's very concerning to me. I mean, we've got these people, not to mention First Amendment rights, we have actual federal laws that prevent people from protesting at Supreme Court justices' homes, which is what we're seeing. This aggressive post-leak of a draft opinion from a Supreme Court justice, and these protesters, all hours of the day and night. Look, there's a right to free speech, but when you're attempting to influence the final decision of the most important court, probably not just in the land but in the world, that is a serious issue, and there are federal statutes that cover that. If you want to protest, go to the Supreme Court. Don't go to their home.
Yeah, unacceptable, beyond unacceptable.
And I've called on Merrick Garland to enact that statute. I haven't heard yet. We'll see.
I don't think you're going to, but keep that up. So, next question.
Yeah.
Let's talk about America First, and let's talk about what that means to you. So, you're a staunch ally of the former President Donald Trump. And in many ways, I believe he really helped to reinvigorate this America First movement. But tell me, what does America First mean to you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of what America First is and of what actually President Trump's agenda was. I got elected in 2010, and at that time, I was running on the idea of bringing back our workforce, making America strong again. With our supply chains, with our workers, empowering them again. We'd lost so much to Asia. And the concept of fair trade, not free trade. I'm talking about that long before I was 2010, my first election into the state assembly. And then along comes a guy named Donald Trump who starts saying some of the things that I remembered. And by the way, a lot of these things that Ross Perot had actually talked about when he ran. So it was like a new way of getting away from this globalist view where America is just one of a community of nations and we're not the most important. And what Trump did is rolled that back and said, America is the most important nation. We are the beacon of freedom, of individual rights, and we need to be if there isn't an America, there's nowhere to turn. And I think we've seen that isolationism and the isolationism of the past has been a folly. That was wrong. That was wrong. Not a good policy for the United States, which is proven, throughout the generations from World War II all the way up until now. And I think there's a misinterpretation of America First that somehow that means isolationism, that we don't help our neighbors, that we don't get involved to make sure there's peace in the world. Nation building, that's a whole different thing. But strategically, I think what his policy is to make sure that America is ensuring that every nation has the opportunity to pursue peace and democracy in a democratic type system. And I don't think it's isolationism, that we're never going to have any kind of trade with the rest of the world. And Trump emphasized a lot. It isn't free trade, which is unfair because China's cheating. They're stealing our intellectual property. They manipulate their currency. They manipulate other countries. They leverage their economic strength. And they do a lot to dump cheap goods on our marketplace, that we needed to come up with a tariff system and some other things, that it was painful to globalists and painful to the very wealthy people who succumbed to China. But in the end, what Trump was trying to do is realign our place in the world to have fair trade, and he defined it as reciprocal trade. So a lot of things that Trump did, rolling back a lot of the regulations, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the tariffs, making us strong on the international stage, rebuilding our military so we can actually be strong and support our allies around the world and support that entire worldview that we have to have trade, but it has to be free, it has to be fair, and it has to be reciprocal. And I think that often people think that we're just going to live in an isolationist dome in the middle of the United States and we're never going to interact with the rest of the world. And I think that view sometimes gets misinterpreted. Because I don't think that was Trump's view.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And in summary, what I heard is we certainly need to take care of the American people. We need to be supporters of our allies, but we have to make sure it's fair, it's reciprocal, and that it makes sense for everyone.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we can't help when there's humanitarian issues,
Which we do all the time.
Which we do. And our ally, I mean, we can't get into every single situation, but I do think we need to look at it strategically. I think people look back at what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and look at it as nation building or whatever they want to call it. But I think we have to look at what is in the strategic interest of the United States. That should be our foreign policy. It may sometimes come out a little cold, but we have to make sure that we are also always looking for human rights. I think a lot of ways this is what the UN was conceived to be, but they have not turned out to be what we've conceived, which is problematic. So now the United States has to take that mantle.
Right. They haven't lived up
Certainly not.
to that mission.
It's not today. You know?
Yeah. You just mentioned Iraq, and that's a good segue into, we've talked about some domestic policy. Let's talk some foreign policy. Now, a couple weekends ago, the IRGC fired over 10 ballistic missiles into Erbil, Iraq, to our U.S. General Consulate there. The IRGC very quickly claimed responsibility for this attack that was dangerously close to our consulate. So clearly, the IRGC was sending a message to the White House with this attack, but that hasn't stopped the White House from continuing to engage in diplomacy with Tehran. So question to you, Congresswoman, is it time for the White House to potentially admit defeat with this diplomacy and say diplomacy has failed and pivot back to maximum pressure? What are your thoughts?
I don't know if I'd call it diplomacy. I would call it surrendering, because I don't think that we're being diplomatic. Diplomacy requires a give and take on both sides. We're basically surrendering. Every time the Iranians and the IRGC and the mullahs make a demand, we succumb to that. They leave the bargaining table. We offer more. Instead of walking away, and I think we're at the point where we need to walk away from the bargaining table and let them know that we needed to go back. We should. I don't think you're going to see it in this administration. The maximum pressure campaign worked. It forced Iran to actually scale back. It also gave hope and some promise to the allies and the other people in that part of the Middle East, because it brought on the Abraham Accords. It brought on other countries saying, you know what, maybe we need to start looking at peace deals.
Agreed.
And instead of waiting for Palestine to just, the Palestinians just say, we're going to wait for them, unless they do a peace deal, we're screwed. And I think that the unique nature of what President Trump and his administration did is, okay, if you're not going to do a deal, we're going to go to everybody else around you. And that was part of the maximum pressure campaign, not to mention, the taking out of Soleimani and a lot of these other important things that the Trump administration was willing to do. When the Trump administration drew a line in the sand and they crossed it, we retaliated. We held the line. Right now, what the Biden administration is doing is just, they keep pulling us to their side to the point where we're looking at potentially in this Iran nuclear deal with the special envoy, Rob Malley. I mean, he's basically just anything the Iranians want, he's giving them. And that is not negotiation. That's not diplomacy. That is surrendering, in my opinion. And when you look at what we've done, I mean, this latest deal that's getting leaked out, by the way, I had a letter demanding that Malley come to the Congress and talk transparently about what you're doing on these deals and negotiating with terrorists. A group, the IRGC, which is, a federal terrorist organization or a foreign terrorist organization, and the Biden administration contemplating removing that designation when they fit all the criteria of that. And then looking at the $90 billion in potential sanctions, $90 billion in potential sanctions that would go back to Iran just to be another foreign, more terrorist organizations, more proxies that would be, whether it's the Houthis, going after the Saudis, everything that's happening in the Middle East. And we're back in the terrorism, in the hostage trade again. So we're basically going to be giving, we're going to be giving about $7 billion for 4 U.S. Improperly held U.S. citizens who we're going to give them $7 billion for them. We're succumbing to this type of non-negotiating sort of leverage situation that they're using all the leverage they have, and we're using none that we have, and we've gotten weaker. And I think Malley is the same guy who negotiated the JCPOA, the original Iran nuclear deal, and so now we've got the same guy. Won't be transparent. He's done 2 classified briefings with our committee, and I'm not sure who else. I'm sure he's met with others. In those briefings, they were not helpful, and I can't comment on what was in there, but basically they were highly critical of President Trump's President Trump's policies, which kept us safe and brought, a hope and a glimmer of the hope for peace in the Middle East for the first time in how long? So I disagree with them fundamentally on that, and I want them to present those ideas to the American people in an open forum where we can actually say, what are you doing? How are you negotiating? Why are you taking that? People are upset about us supporting Ukraine. How about we're going to be giving almost $100 billion to a terrorist organization and a terrorist country that not only oppresses their own people, they oppress their neighbors, and they're involved in all the proxy wars around the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, well said. We know that if we give even $10 billion to the Iranian regime, $10 billion of that's going to go out the door to their terrorist proxies. It's not going to go to investing in infrastructure inside of Iran or supporting the Iranian people. They have a track record since 1979 of death to America, death to Israel, murder, censor, oppress their own people who speak out against the regime. They have not once changed their tune.
And they're still on Twitter.
And they're still on Twitter. So next question, we're gonna stay focused on the administration and this diplomacy. As you know, world leaders were in Vienna all of last year. They've been back again this year multiple times. I've lost track, Congresswoman. Maybe we're in the 10th round, the 15th round, the 20th round. I don't know. A bunch of people are having nice meals in Vienna, Rob Malley being one of them. And listen, Rob, to your point, has explicitly stated that the U.S. is ready, willing, and able to lift all economic sanctions on this regime. Just come back to the negotiating table and we'll give you everything that you want. Now, also, he's privately lobbied the State Department to remove this FTO designation, saying it's purely symbolic. The statement is beyond absurd for him to say such a thing. The IRGC, as you said, has directly and indirectly killed hundreds of Americans. Now, Rob Malley has said it's symbolic. Senator Chris Murphy has said it's symbolic. Ilhan Omar has said it's symbolic. And yes, Murphy was on MSNBC publicly lobbying on behalf of the IRGC saying, remove this designation. So do you have a message for Senator Murphy or anyone else who supports the lifting of this FTO designation?
Do they not have respect for the American citizens who've been killed by this regime? Do they not see what's happened to American citizens over the years and our allies by the money that's come from the United States? Don't they remember the pallets of cash? Why are we surrendering? When you say, I think it's, again, surrendering. What is their reason? What are they getting from this? It is not helping the American people. It's not instilling confidence in our allies in the Middle East. In fact, it's doing the opposite. There's less respect for the administration and for the way the United States is handling this. We should be consistent as Republicans and Democrats. All we're doing is portraying a lot of disarray between us. We should be, in a bipartisan way, getting together, regardless of whether, I know a lot of people had Trump derangement syndrome, but regardless, we need to get together and be strong in this situation. We cannot continue to surrender to the demands of a dictatorship. That's the opposite of everything we stand for. I'm confounded by Chris Murphy's statement, or Senator Murphy. I don't understand what is in it for him. Ilhan Omar, I don't even want to begin to judge what her motivations are. But her motivations don't seem to be in generally in benefiting the United States, and even though she's taken an oath to uphold that. So I would like to ask them, what are they getting from it?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't help the American people. It doesn't help the Iranians trapped within this regime who are being oppressed. It doesn't help Iranians around the world. It doesn't help their allies, our allies and our friends in the Middle East who are in a perpetual state of terror of what could be coming if we were to give this money to them. Who's next? Who are they going to bomb next? Who are they going to kill next? They basically have unfettered access, not to mention the fact that we have given them access under this deal if it were to go through. The Russians are going to be, the Russians who are, murdering and killing, and it's been described as a genocide, but they're killing innocent Ukrainians in an unprovoked attack on Ukraine, are going to be building the nuclear power plant for the Iranians. And we're giving all kinds of money, and these are non-nuclear activities that they are supporting of the Iranians that are hostile to our neighbors, whether it's funding terrorists, whether it's attacks on Mike Pompeo, attacks on on the former envoy, Brian Hook, who negotiated these deals. I mean, and I guess when asked about what we're going to do with that, they dismissed it. I mean, it's okay that we have a death sentence against our former Secretary of State and a former key negotiator from our State Department on these issues. This is unacceptable. But the Biden administration does nothing. Oh yeah, that's all right. The Iranians want to kill him. That's fine. It's okay because he was a Trump administration person. Is that what's happening here? I mean, I hate to think that that's as low as they're going to sink on this.
Well, Blinken.
That is not diplomacy, by the way.
No, to your point, it's pure surrendering. And I think Secretary Blinken might have been in the House Foreign Affairs Committee at some point, and he was asked about this. I think Representative Lee Zeldin asked him, and on one side he says, yes, I acknowledge that the Iranian regime is actively trying to kill former officials, and then on the other side he says, but we're going to continue to engage in diplomatic efforts with them. It's the height of hypocrisy. It makes absolutely no sense.
Zeldin on that always, and he's been continuously strong on this issue, and we're going to miss him. I'm hoping he's going to be the next governor of New York. So, well,
we'll see what happens with that. So we're going to keep the focus on the Islamic Republic. A couple more questions here. Now, we've talked quite a bit here about how the Islamic Republic funds terrorism all around the world to the tune of billions of dollars every year. They probably provide at least over $1 billion just to Hezbollah and Lebanon alone. And also other financial operational support to Hamas and Palestinian Jihad in southern Israel, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and all over. Over the last couple of months, the Iranian people have been, not just months, but years, they've been protesting inside of Iran for this very reason. Now, us as an organization, we have always amplified their voices and done what we can to bring that message to the American people and also to elected officials like yourself. The people of Iran, they're sick and tired of their government funding these terrorist proxies. While they don't have access to running water, dependable electricity, access to social media, or anything like that. And just this week, Congresswoman, the people of Iran again took to the streets of Iran, chanting death to Khomeini and death to the dictatorship, or death to the dictators. I think we have a video that we want to play just for you to see real quick, and then maybe we'll get you to comment on that. This is a common theme all throughout Iran. I mean, it's clear to you and I sitting here, and hopefully I think a lot of the American people, that the Iranian people are seeking freedom, they're seeking liberty, and that they clearly do not share the death to America beliefs that their regime has. So, simple question to you. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you stand with the Iranian people that are rising up and protesting their regime?
Well, absolutely. This is what it's all about. This is why we're the United States. We love to see people like this standing up to a dictatorship and standing up to a regime that is not only, killing its neighbors, but killing its own people. I worry about the safety of those people. Without a country with free speech, wasting and squandering their natural resources and their assets. To a country also that has an amazing history throughout the world, a cultural history that's a treasure to the world. What they've, the Persians, all the different groups that have come up through with innovations and ideas throughout human history. So, yes, and we had a moment when Barack Obama was president where the Iranians actually were crying out for freedom, and I think we had a moment then that was squandered. I think President Trump was trying in some way to get them their final peace that they would love to have at some point. I think the Iran nuclear deal is counterproductive to any of this, giving more power and more legitimacy to a regime that's murderous, a regime that's authoritarian, a regime that doesn't respect its neighbors and respect the rule of law and really respect freedom and peace, is not a regime we should be negotiating or surrendering to at this point. So I'm going to continue to fight on behalf of those people and people all around the world who want to have freedom. That's what we are as Americans. That should be the greatest that's the greatest thing that we should export from our country is freedom and respect for human rights. because that's what we're known for. And if there isn't a beacon of hope for those things somewhere, it wouldn't be. They're just, where would you turn? And I've heard that said to me by so many new American citizens, new immigrants to this country from authoritarian regimes. My community in upstate New York is a home to a lot of refugees who have come from these types of regimes. And so to the fact that they can come and have free speech, and they tell me this all the time. You know, I talk to them, they go back to their country. My country is beautiful, it's a beautiful place. And I say, would you ever go back there? Oh no, I'm not free. And that is I hear that over and over. And so I think we take that for granted as we have government, bigger government, that's oppressing our rights and taking away our freedoms right now.
That's true, and you're right. President Obama did have, excuse me, a golden opportunity to make something happen. And I think to your point, President Trump took a different approach. He didn't ever want to get involved from a military perspective, but from the maximum pressure campaign and sanctions campaign that he had, he got the Iranian regime down to $4 billion in international reserves. Now, that's a lot of money for you and me and for the average American people, but $4 billion for a country like Iran is, paying rent for a couple months. I'm, not happy to report.
I wonder if today, had we not had the regime we have in place in the United States, if we would be a step closer to freedom.
Well, we 100% would have been, and the final point.
We're almost there.
The final point on this with Iran is that in just a year of Joe Biden being in the White House, the Iranians have gone from $4 billion in international reserves to now close to over $40 billion, and that's happened because they've been selling crude oil to China. We have sanctions on the books that President Trump was enforcing that Joe Biden is not enforcing. So that's $4 billion to $40 billion in under a year.
It's incredible.
Crazy.
Just think what we've lost. And I worry about what we've lost and how much more we're going to lose before it's irreversible. The American people need to wake up and realize what's happening here, and I'm hoping we're gonna start with the midterms.
I think they will.
Not to get into the political side of it, but
I think they will. I think
regardless of party, like people that understand like what a critical moment we are in time.
Right. So I think you talked about Pompeo and Hook and those death threats. Now you're very correct. I mean, they have Secret Service details that follow them everywhere they go. I saw Brian Hook just a couple weeks ago at a restaurant. He had 4 Secret Service members with him. This is no way to live for former officials, right? Joe Biden, is he selling out the American people by continuing to negotiate with a regime that has not only just threatened to kill former Trump officials, but as you know, in January, Khomeini put out a video threatening and depicting the assassination of Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, what are they thinking?
They don't have a problem. They don't mind. They don't have a problem with that. And I'm not sure Joe Biden is completely on top of what's happening, but he never has been. And I will say that as there are a lot of Democrats who, over the years, I've liked and admired, and not to be partisan about, but there's one person that has stood out to me as someone who really lacks the gravitas, the experience, and the ability to be the President of the United States, and that's Joe Biden. Poor decision-making, a career politician. Now we're seeing he's leveraged his own positions, whether it's senator or vice president, to enrich himself and his family that has reached a scandalous level, and we'll find out where that goes in the future. He is not in a good position to be the leader of the free world, and particularly not the commander-in-chief of our country. I really don't know if he understands the depth of what's happening based on what his staff will give him notes. I just don't think he has the drive and the grit to be a commander-in-chief who can make decisions from a foxhole when we are really, need to make those types of tough decisions. And a lot of our presidents who've been great leaders in the past have been forged either by coming from poverty or some kind of really tough situation where they've had to overcome, they've had to overcome some kind of weakness or overcome some kind of devastating situation. And those seem to be the ones that are true leaders. Or they've been just, President Trump, it was a miraculous win in 2016, whether you like him or not, to be able to overcome the establishment in both parties and to win and really stand up and be a voice to the American people and say he's going to do something and live up to it, knowing that people know around the world. I mean, they can say that America's back and we've restored America. That's not what I hear.
That's not what I hear either.
That's not what I hear when I travel and meet people around the world and I can't say who, but when I meet foreign ambassadors, They're very much fans of President Trump's style in terms of his strength and courage to take a position and stick to it, and his ability, to make decisions, and if he makes a wrong decision, to be able to pivot to make the right decision later. And those are the signs of leadership are just not there with this administration. And when you have no leader at the top, and when America is weak, the rest of the world is in chaos. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now.
Of course, and we saw, I think, about a month or 2 months ago, you had Joe Biden reaching out to the leaders of the UAE and to Saudi Arabia, begging them, and they wouldn't even get on the phone. That's the world we're living in today. It's so fun. It's so ironic that one side, to your point, has said the world's laughing at us and all these different things, and the adults are back. And no, I think the world is not just laughing at us right now; they're ignoring us. And then you have our adversaries.
They're fearful for the future.
You have Russia, China, Iran. I mean, I think they're like eating our breakfast, lunch, and dinner right now.
Oh yeah, well they have been, and we were able to sort of put a dent in that. But now, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're in a tough spot in this country, but we have to continue to fight. We can't give up. And I know a lot of people who are just. I mean, I'm in the Election Integrity Caucus. I founded it because people got frustrated with the voting situation, and they're like, well, "I'm just not going to vote." I'm like, "No, we need to vote." As Americans, we need to stand up too. We can't give up the fight. Our patriots faced much harder obstacles than we did, the people that founded this country, on good principles. And this country has shown that when it makes mistakes, we can correct those and move on. There is a better America tomorrow. We just have to be willing to do that. And that's what leadership is. Leadership is not just giving up. Leadership is continuing to fight, especially when you're down.
Maybe you'll run for president.
I don't know about that.
You'd be a good president, Claudia.
Oh, gee, thanks.
So we've talked about a lot of politics here. We're going to take the politics hat off just for a second here. Let the hair down a little bit. Last question. Just tell us a little bit more. It gives our audience, I think, some insight to you. So if you could have dinner or lunch or breakfast, whatever, with any two individuals, deceased or alive, who would the two be, and where would this take place?
Well, I would love to, this is going to be an engaging dinner, so I would love to have had dinner or had time to meet Winston Churchill. I think he would have been a dynamic, engaging person to have dinner with. And I don't know if I can, I've always admired Sister Teresa, now Saint Teresa, and Pope John Paul II, and I'm not even Catholic, so I find them to be, they were incredible leaders at a time. I have to throw Reagan in there because it was Reagan and John Paul II.
You only have two people.
I know. I've got all these people at this dinner.
You're inviting
that
more.
I love. And, there's just so many great leaders out there. Sure. But I would love to have dinner with them. Dinner, lunch, a lovely meal on the Adriatic Sea. My favorite restaurant in the world, other than Ventura's in Utica, New York, but my favorite world restaurant is called Kod Marko, and it's on the Bay of Šipan and the island of Šipan in Šipanska Luka. That means the Bay of Šipan. In Croatia, and it's absolutely an amazing spot, and I would love to. It's absolutely incredible. Okay. You have to take a boat to get there.
All right, we'll go sometime.
Yeah, let's go. It's absolutely beautiful family restaurant. Everything is tremendous. So that's where I'd love. I can't wait to. I'd love to be able to go there this summer, but unfortunately, it looks like I'm going to be in a lot of elections.
You might be a little bit. Yeah. So Congresswoman, thank you very much. We've reached our time limit for today, and on behalf of my organization, the Iranian Americans for Liberty, I really want to thank you for making the time to connect with us, and more importantly, for all of the work that you do, to your point, on behalf of liberty and freedom-seeking people. It's beyond commendable. Anyways, I'd like for you to maybe give some closing remarks, talk to the Iranian American community a little bit, maybe the Iranian people who I'm sure are listening and watching. What are your closing thoughts?
Thank you so much for having this and doing this and continuing to put the spotlight on the Iranian people. So much we hear about countries, and you hear about vilifying the people of those countries because their leadership is bad. And I love that you highlight how good the Iranian people are and how much they seek and crave democracy and how courageous they are. The video you showed of these people protesting in the streets against a murderous regime. Not just a regime that's going to crack down on them, but a regime that could potentially kill them, and the risks that they take to do that. So to me, it's all about integrity and courage and the compassion that we have to be able to do these things and then to stick with it and to be tenacious about never quitting. I think that's what's going to bring this country back, and I think that's what's going to help the Iranians and help all of us to. And those are the 4 principles that I sort of have. After all I've had, as you described, my tough races. I was in journalism. I owned a newspaper. I'm a lawyer. I've done a lot of things. You know, I kind of distilled everything down to those things. If you have, if you have the commitment and basically the tenacity to stick with something, the courage, the integrity, and the compassion for your fellow man, I think that you are going to go a long way in the world, because all those things, you really can't have one without the other. I hate to have, it's one thing to have integrity, but you also have to have compassion. And if you have integrity and compassion, if you don't have courage, you're not going to be able to bring that to the world, and also the tenacity to fight it out and not quit when the going gets tough. So those are things that have kept me going, and I'm still going. I'm pretty healthy at my age, and that's how I got to be the teenage curling champion in 1975.
Oh, what a fun fact. What a fun
I was
fact.
14 years old.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding. That's it's a joke that we have with the press corps in my last term. So, but I've done a lot. I mean, I love to try new things and do different things, and so I encourage everyone to do that. But really, what we do for mankind and humankind right now in this world, and what you do for the Iranians, is really incredible. Oh. And so we have a lot of wonderful former Iranian citizens
in your district.
In my district. So, and they're fighting for democracy for their homeland as well.
Yeah, of course.
It's a great thing.
Well, Congresswoman, thank you again for making this time to connect with us, our organization, our community. Until next time, please remember, lead with liberty at every turn. Have a good afternoon, and may God continue to bless America and also the liberty-seeking Iranian people. Have a great day.